check out Liquid IV. Listen, it's the holiday season, folks, and you and I both know hydration is paramount. Okay, if you want to get through the shopping, if you want to get through visiting the family and friends, the sports and live events, come on. Got to make sure you stay hydrated, and there's no better way that I know of than Liquid IV. Okay, packed with B vitamins and all your other essential vitamins and nutrients there. Tastes great. You just take that hydration stick, you put it in a bottle of water, shake that sucker up, and enjoy. I'm telling you, shop better hydration today. In fact, if you visit liquidiv.com right now, you'll save 20% on your entire order by using the promo code Duke Loves Rasslin. That's right, Duke Loves Rasslin. No spaces, going to get you 20% off. What are you waiting for? Liquidiv.com. Enjoy. And now, let's get on with the show.
Duke, this is your favorite listener, Just Larry. Just Larry knows you're celebrating your birthday, so Just Larry's going to sing you a special rendition of a song written, produced, and performed by, you guessed it, Just Larry. And it goes a little something like this. Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns. Remind me to sing you a special copy of that one just because Just Larry knows it's going to be a smash hit. No need to say thanks, Just Larry knows you like it. Peace!
Well, it's that time of year. It's time for International Duke Day 2023. So let me be the first to congratulate you on another year around the sun and a successful 2023 with the podcast, as always. I also want to thank you for, allowing me to be the voice of the fan and through our daily conversations, making me a much more educated fan and someone who learns to think about things a little bit and the reasoning behind things. And I truly do appreciate that about you, my friend Duke. And lastly, I just want to thank you, as always, just for being my friend. You've been there during some of my tougher times, and I really do appreciate that. And, hopefully 2024 is another successful year for you. We'll talking to you soon. See you later.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke Loves Wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Everybody, this is your favorite guest on this show, Rob the Genius. Duke finally stopped hiding from me because he knew what was going to happen when I came back. So now I'm here to give it to him.
Okay. Brothers and sisters, International Duke Day. I am a guy that is a man of the people. Legitimately, Rob the Genius is one of your favorite guests that we have on the show, which is why he's on more than most. In history there, it's because you folks love him. So yes, Rob is back, and I'm just gonna be straight up here. This is not gonna be a good time for you, Rob.
Oh, really now?
It's not gonna be a good time. Since you've been gone, okay? Since the last time you appeared on this show, Phil Brooks, CM Punk, he was fired.
Yes.
From his previous place of employment.
Yes.
And he's been hired. He tucked his tail between his legs and he crawled back to the WWE, and he's been brought back into the fold. So I want to start off with something important here, Rob, and I want to get your take on this because you're a mathematician.
Yes, sir.
And you have a lot of connections in the math and science world.
Yes.
So I have a theory, and I want you to do what you have to do in order to make this a law, okay? Right. We don't want to play games here.
Let's hear it.
If Tony Khan didn't have a chronic back issue that has caused him to not be 100%, there is no way that Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk, could have put Tony Khan's life in danger because Tony Khan, the son of a billionaire, would have given CM Punk, a.k.a. Phil Brooks, the thrashing of a lifetime. This is not just a theory, Rob. I need you to make this a law, okay? You make that a law.
Are you sniffing the powder with Tony now?
Listen, hey, take it easy now, okay? That is unconfirmed reports about whatever we're talking about as it relates to Tony Khan, okay? But I'm serious now, Rob, okay? There's no way Phil Brooks could have pulled that off if Tony Khan was 100%. He has a chronic back issue, and Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk, he took advantage of that, and that's how we find ourselves where we are today.
Oh, so wait a minute. So you mean the same Phil Brooks who won like a 2-against-5 locker room fight? We have a problem with Tony Khan?
Well, Tony Khan is the son of a billionaire. He can afford to have the highest degree of training. I have no doubt in my mind, just from seeing flashes of anger from him, when he said we're not going to put up with this, what anymore. I have no doubt in my mind that he can handle the failed UFC fighter known as Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk. All right.
You do realize a failed UFC fighter can still kick most people's asses. Right?
But Tony Khan is not most people, and that's what I think you need to understand here. See, we play games with this guy, and listen, I'm one of his biggest critics, but I'm going to give Tony Khan his due where he's earned it. And the fact of the matter is, this is a man, not just a guy. This is a man who could absolutely destroy CM Punk if he wanted to.
Oh, in a court of law? Sure.
He had to practice restraint. Okay. I believe this. So I need you to spread the word.
So is that why he came out and said he feared for his life?
Well, he has a bad back. It's a chronic back issue. It's well documented. There's no question about that. In addition to that, he's lactose intolerant, so he's having some digestive issues. The combination of the two is the reason why CM Punk was able to get over on him one time. All right? Had it not been for that, though, Tony Khan would have owned him.
Yeah, right. Okay, sure.
I'm just putting that out there.
Right.
You and I have been in full disagreement about this whole debacle that is CM Punk and AEW.
Yes.
And it centers around the fact that you like to make excuses for bullies.
So there you go.
I want to understand how you can have the audacity to continue to make excuses for a guy who, as you just said, he's beating up executives. He's threatening the life of the president of the company. He obviously put hands on Jack Perry, who is literally salt of the earth. I want to understand why you take up for people like that, because that is not the character that I know of you, Rob the Genius.
Okay. This is funny. All right. Well, I've said in many different venues and formats that Tony Khan brought this on himself. That he cultivated this environment where you bring in somebody who in the past has had issues, and you made a choice to bring him in. Right? I mean, when the Chicago Bulls traded for Dennis Rodman, they knew what Rodman's history was. They chose to trade for him. Okay, you chose, and Tony Khan chose to sign CM Punk, and that means you get everything that comes along with CM Punk, which means either you have a structure in place to keep that in check and to corral that type of thing, or you don't, and they don't have it. So and that's his own fault. That's on him, and you know what you should and there's also a lack of candor with his locker room, okay? He brought in, because if they want to know, okay, well, why are you signing this guy? Because we need him. Because our business has gotten stagnant in every measure. We need something to kick things up, kickstart things so we can get to the next level. And so this is the one guy out there who is available who could possibly do that. That's why he's here. And so y'all need to get along with him, okay? And y'all need to not cause any trouble with him. All right, that's okay. That's and he didn't do that, obviously. And so then you have Hangman Page get on the mic and start shooting, okay, like an idiot, okay, and that's where it starts, okay. And look, I'm not condoning Punk's behavior at all, by the way, okay?
Oh, you're not? You're
No.
not condoning a guy
No, I'm not.
who
No, I'm not.
inserts
No.
himself into, like, the boss tells you could do something. The guy tells you can't. You said, I'm going to listen to the boss, and he wants to choke you over it. You're not condoning that behavior?
No, I'm not. I'm not condoning it. I said that. I said very clear. Look, and Tony Khan had a right to fire him when he did, but Tony Khan is to blame for fostering that environment. Okay, Jack Perry is an idiot, and Jack Perry should not be out there. He was an idiot for going on camera and yelling real glass. No, and he did that on purpose. Everybody who knows about the story and who knows what that's about knows that he was doing that to get shot at Punk and to antagonize him. Okay, and you shouldn't do. And you know what? You shouldn't be doing that. You're freaking Jack Perry. Okay.
Well, hold on. He's Jack Perry. That's right. He's the son of one of the greatest actors of all time, Luke Perry. He has a gorgeous head of hair. He's a man who's in tip-top shape. And he is a hell of a talent. He is a hard-working guy who has never had an issue in the history of his wrestling career. Yeah, he's Jack Perry. He's a guy who's beloved, while CM Punk is a guy that is loathed. And that's the real issue. That's why Punk is jealous of Jack Perry. Let's just be honest about this here, Rob. Okay, please. He doesn't look like Jack Perry. He never has. He didn't grow up rich like Jack Perry has. He didn't have a daddy to bring him to wrestling school like Jack Perry did. Let's be honest here. Okay, that's why Punk has a problem with guys like Jack Perry and even a guy like Tony Khan. Tony Khan's daddy made all that money, and he gives Tony Khan whatever he wants. He gave him his own wrestling company. Right? CM Punk was never given a wrestling company. So if you really go down the list and you look at the people that Punk takes issue with, it's people who have had things that Punk never had growing up, and this is his way of lashing out against them.
Oh, good grief.
That's it. I just psychoanalyzed the whole situation there.
Oh, good grief. Well, and look, how's it working now? Punk is back in WWE. I'm sure he signed for a lot of money. He is right now getting big TV ratings, getting big video traffic, getting big everything.
He had to beg for his job back.
And?
He had to beg for his job back. His last chance, like Seth Rollins said, he had to beg for his job back. Right?
And I'm willing to bet that's not the case.
And I dare him.
I'm willing to bet that as soon as he was available. Don't listen to that bullshit that we just came together at the last minute. No, you can look at the full court press they have done with him since he came back. You can look at that and you can tell. Trust me, that did not happen over. They didn't throw that together in 2 days, okay, or even a week.
Yeah, but that was no press. That was no full court press.
It absolutely has been. He's been on every show. He's been on Raw. He's been on NXT. He showed up at the NXT takeover, for crying out loud. Okay?
Yeah, they're putting him to work. He needs to work. That's right.
He wants to be, but they wouldn't do that if he was somebody they were just bringing in just for the bare minimum.
Listen,
no. You're gonna listen to me now, okay? If he was somebody who they were just bringing in to make a couple of bucks off of and nothing else, if that's it, they would do the bare minimum with him, and they would give him his TV segments, and that would be it. And and they would give him his 10 minutes of TV on one of the two shows, and they would tell and that would be all. But they have him coming out there. He's working on every show. He's backstage at NXT talking to people, giving them the advice that those morons in AEW didn't want to listen to. They have uploaded like almost 20 matches of his on their YouTube channel since he came back. That is ridiculous. Okay.
It's ridiculous. They're paying the guy. They're putting him to work.
Okay. Well, he doesn't have to do any work for them to upload his matches on their YouTube channel. But they uploaded almost 20 matches on their YouTube channel since he came back. And you know why they're doing that? Because they want everybody to see who he's back. Okay. And they want to make it okay. So that they are doing the full court press. This is not somebody they're just bringing in to, hurt Tony, or they're not just bringing in him for the bare minimum. They are giving him full exposure. They are giving him everything. Okay.
I think you're missing a key point here, though, Rob. You got to understand something. CM Punk hasn't had a decent wrestling match in over 10 years.
That's not true.
CM Punk hasn't cut a decent promo in over 10 years.
That's not true either.
So
that's not
showing
that is not true.
Times when the guy actually was worth a damn.
Oh, good grief.
Okay.
Excuse me. Hello. He just cut a great promo last Friday on SmackDown.
It was not great. It was.
Yes, it was. You're hating now. You are being a hater.
That's why they sent him to the Performance Center.
No, you are being a hater. You are being a hater.
He needs to be retrained. This is what you do with an employee who's been out. He's been out on the shelf for a while. He needs to be retrained on how to wrestle, how to cut a decent promo, how to look like a star. These are all things that they're doing here. Okay, because that is the WWE way. Ladies
and gentlemen, this man is a hater. Okay,
it's the truth.
And listen, and to everyone listening to this, by the way, I have not been a fan of CM. Look, I know I sound like a CM Punk fan here.
Oh, you see, yeah.
Okay, but I have not been a CM Punk fan for a long time. I am a defender of the truth. Okay, and so I will defend the truth, even if it is for somebody who I am not a fan of, because if there's one thing I cannot stand, it is lies and misinformation. So even if I have to defend someone who I'm not a fan of, I would rather do that. I would rather tell the truth about someone I don't like than they let lies be spread about them. Okay, because you know why? Most of the 99 times out of 100, or even 100 times out of 100, the truth is all that you need to know. If you really want to criticize somebody, you don't have to make stuff up. You don't. Okay, you don't. In pretty much every case, there is something truthful and accurate and legitimate that you can criticize them for. And that's all you got to do is reference that. You don't have to make stuff up. You don't have to lie about things, for crying out loud. Okay. To say he hasn't had a great promo. No, stop it. That's ridiculous.
Listen, he was sent to the Performance Center.
That's ridiculous.
In order to learn how to be a star again, because it's been a very long time since he actually was a star. And that's just the truth of it. All right.
That's not true. That's not true. That's false. That's false. That is false.
So now here we are.
That is false. That is false information. That is false.
He's in the ring with Seth Rollins, and he completely got eaten up.
That is Seth Rollins. More lies. False. You are saying things that are false. At best, they are your opinion.
Ridiculous.
At best, they are your opinion, but no, you are saying things that are false. Okay.
I can smell Pepsi. I can smell the Pepsi on your breath, so I understand.
That man, look, that man. Okay, he returned at Survivor Series. Him walking out from the back has 7 million views on YouTube. Okay, 7 million views.
Okay, so what? So what? I could get 7 million views if I walked out of Survivor Series as well. What's the big deal?
Oh, please! You'd be looking to get 7 views. What are you talking about? Okay.
I see we're not going to get anywhere on this CM Punk thing, so let's move on. It's clear.
Hasn't cut a brick promo in 10 years. The man, the first night on Collision when he came out there, he cut one of the best promos of the year.
I'm telling you right now, Rob, CM Punk was sent to the Performance Center. He was sent to NXT of all places, literally the developmental brand, in order to get retrained, because this guy has been completely amateur hour for over 10 years now. And it's okay. I mean, what do you expect? You know what I mean? You gotta put some. You gotta grease those wheels, man. You gotta take the dust off.
Duke has been hanging out with Tony, back and hitting the stash of the good Colombian pure. Okay,
coffee. It was all coffee. That's right.
Okay. Well, uncut. None of that stepped on shit for you and Tony, boy.
You're lucky that I can control this show, because I know when we can take it off the air for that. My goodness, this is not an episode of Narcos, ladies and gentlemen. I swear to you. Moving on here, because it's clear you and I are not going to agree on the CM Punk. You are a CM Punk mark, and I'm not. So that it is what it is. You are known for being the guy that keeps an eye on what's going on in terms of women's wrestling on television in America.
Yes.
And we're here. It's December, so the end of the year, for shows that they may have another episode or two left, but whatever. I don't think there's going to be much of a difference in terms of where the numbers are now and where they could be over the next episode or two of each of the shows there. So let me start from the beginning. What shows in particular do you track?
Okay, so I track Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Impact Wrestling on Thursdays, their Thursday show, and AEW Dynamite.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm clear now, you only track the threshold is 2 hours and above, right? So it's either 2 or 3 hour shows there.
Yes. Now, if you're wondering why I don't track Collision, it's because Collision basically follows the exact same pattern as Dynamite as far as booking women's matches. So you could pick one or the other and get the same results.
That's interesting. Okay, so I think for next year you definitely should have Collision on there just to illustrate that. But what you're saying is they're tied with whatever Dynamite is. Collision is tied with them.
Yeah, they both have one match every week, and it's and it runs for about the same amount of time.
Okay,
and
that's good to know.
It's basically
so technically it is part of this then.
Collision. Yeah, because I mean
you have the data.
Because Dynamite. When I get to it later, but for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, for all the wrong reasons, Dynamite is the easiest show to track, and Collision is the same thing. For all the wrong reasons.
So just to recap, because we've had a tremendous upsurge in new listeners for 2023, and I thank all of you folks. You know, they've been going back into the archives as well, which is awesome. But if you're unfamiliar, so Rob, once again, he tracks women being featured on television in pro wrestling. You know, how many matches. He also tracks match time, things of that nature there, in order to illustrate who's actually putting their money where their mouths are, who's actually dedicated to women's wrestling and actually creating some type of opportunities for women in pro wrestling, and who's just, giving us lip service but not actually delivering on it. So I commend Rob for continuing to do this. You've been doing it for years, which I appreciate. So let's start from the beginning here. Give me the rankings starting from number one. So just go right down real quick, and then we'll circle back and fill it in.
Okay, number one, NXT.
Okay.
Number two, Monday Night Raw. Number three, SmackDown. Number four is Impact, and number five is Dynamite.
So Dynamite and Collision would be tied, right?
Yes.
So okay.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. This is really interesting here. So again, first of all, the promotion that featured the most women's wrestling in 2023 is WWE.
Yes. Now, that does not mean we should be giving them medals and awards, though. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a ranking, though. So it's either,
yes.
You know what I mean? So at least in this context,
yes,
they, at the very least, their 3 shows on television, they made sure that they featured more women's wrestling than all the other programs that you tracked there.
Yes.
Okay. So start again with number one here. So NXT. NXT, they consistently are the number one show when it comes to featuring women's wrestling, right?
Yes. So for the last 2 years, they've been number one, and they've been number one by a pretty wide margin. The first year I started doing this was 2021. And just for any new listeners, just to give you if you're wondering why on earth am I doing this, I saw it was a problem, and I decided to take a look at it because I'm a mathematician. I like playing with numbers. So I decided to take a look at this stuff. I've been doing it ever since. So NXT they were number 2 back in 2021 when I started. They moved ahead of everybody last year, and they stayed ahead of everybody this year.
Incredible. What do you think makes them number one specifically? Are they just featuring more women in general? Like there's in terms of the amount of women they're featuring? Because I know match times is its own separate thing that we'll talk about separately. But overall, what makes them number one?
They have more matches. Just in terms of volume, they have more matches every week. They have
more women's matches every week.
Yes, they have more women's matches on average every week, and they have just in total more women's matches in total for the year. They have more women wrestling every week on average, and that's pretty much it. And this year, for the first time, they had the most women's main events on television out of all these 5 shows.
Wow! So this is not a fluke either. This is
no.
Clearly, somebody's doing this on purpose.
Yeah, and I think one thing you don't have the roster hierarchy that you have. In other words, Raw and SmackDown are pretty top heavy. On Raw, you got Rhea and you got Becky, and then you got pretty much everybody else. On SmackDown, you got Charlotte, Bianca, and then you got Asuka and Bailey, and then Io, and then you got everybody else. NXT, like this year, I think Tiffany Stratton kind of emerged as like a bigger star in the division than other people. But for the most part, it's not top heavy. It's so they can plug and play every week. They don't really have like two people who get big numbers and everybody else gets nothing. So it's a lot easier for them to just book more matches, and but still, I mean, they deserve credit for that because they do it. Because and they book again. They just book more matches, and creatively, they actually they give everybody something to do. If you're on camera in NXT, there's some type of angle. There's some. I mean, even if it's not like a big storyline, you got some type of angle. They give people a reason for the match that they're going to be in. Sometimes it's just as simple as the two women bumping into each other in the locker room and like, hey, what are you doing? And they take it to the ring, which, I mean, that's really all you got to do on a week-to-week basis, and they do a lot of that, and they're committed. They are committed to it. They're committed to it year round. Okay. And that's the biggest thing. On, the other shows, they do not commit fully year round. NXT commits fully year round to featuring the women's division, to pushing the women's division, to giving it time, to giving them matches, to giving them stuff to do.
You're absolutely right. And it's not hard to notice that because like you said, they're not taking a couple of women and making it top heavy, the hierarchy, so that you just they got to get their stuff in every week and everybody else is everybody else. No, they rotate women out on a consistent basis, but what they do is, like you said, they give everyone something to do, which in turn elevates everyone. So when you look at this NXT roster of women and you think about a Tiffany Stratton, who clearly is a star. She's going to be main eventing on the main roster very, very soon. It's clear. She's incredible. But then you got Roxanne. And Cora Jade is a wild card. And now we're starting to see the emergence of somebody like Lash Legend, right? Who you saw what she did to Otis the other day.
Yes.
When you start going down the list, I know that they're really dedicated to pushing this Lyra Valkyria. That's somebody that Becky Lynch is very high on, and she's had a hand in her development and what have you, et cetera, et cetera. They just got Nikita Lyons back. You look at what they're doing. JC Jane, that's another one who has stayed in the mix. You know what I mean? Throughout the year, just when you think she's cooling off, they find a way to plug her back in, and she's doing stuff, so you don't forget about her. Tatum Paxley and these folks here, again, same thing. They're finding ways to plug them in so you don't forget about them. It's really interesting. I would say that NXT, if there was a way to book women's wrestling on a program that's not exclusively women's wrestling, NXT does it better than, quite frankly, anyone I've ever seen do it. I would actually say that even the glory years of the TNA Knockouts division, I would say that NXT does a better job than what TNA did back in the day. What do you think about that?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't watching.
Okay,
that was one of my kind of breaks as a fan for it. But one thing that's important is that, okay, look, every woman is not going to be the NXT Women's Champion, all right? And what happens a lot of times on Raw and SmackDown is it's women's championship or bust. If you're not somebody who's going to be a contender for one of the women's championships, you get to slim pickings. But in NXT, look, there are women on that roster in NXT who are never going to be the NXT Women's Champion. Okay, I can't.
Gigi Dolan. Gigi Dolan is never going to be the NXT Women's Champion.
Well, most of the women on that roster are never going to be the NXT Women's Champion.
But you know who they are. If you watch the program, you know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of, but I'd say 90% of that women's roster is probably never going to be NXT Women's
Sure.
Champion.
Sure.
Okay. But they still find stuff for them to do.
Yep.
And which puts them ahead of every other show out there, basically. And well, given the roster size, I will say Impact does find things for people to do, but they have a much smaller women's roster. So, and then this is all, and with NXT, these are all the things you have to factor in. They have a large women's roster, similar to Raw and SmackDown, and they have 2 hours. So everything they do, they do it in less time than Raw has every week, and they do it in the same amount of time as all the other 2-hour shows. So you got to factor that in also. It's not just that they do all of this stuff. It's they do it in the same or less time than everybody else has. And with a big roster, like I said, so all that matters.
Here's the thing that I find interesting because I'm always criticizing AEW, and I know we're going to get to that later, just in terms of the things that I see missing in their product, and as a result, they've hit a ceiling. They have not been able to advance where they could advance. They have the potential to advance because they're focusing on delivering to the quote unquote key demo, which is white males was 18 to 45. They seem to be stuck on those folks, and
they're not succeeding too well with that either.
Well, and we'll get to that, but it's like that's who they want to attract, and they're giving them what they think that population wants. Meanwhile, you look at a program like NXT, and their growth has been tremendous, and there's no surprise here. The growth in audience, the growth in the different demographics, women watching and people of color watching and what have you. Well, who do you see on TV? NXT has one of the most diverse rosters that you've ever seen in pro wrestling.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, men, women, different races, different ethnic backgrounds and what have you. They got it all, don't they?
Yeah. And now, so it's going to be really interesting to see when they make this move over to CW because, the CW, of course, has had a long history of shows that have diverse casts in all different kinds of roles. NXT, if you were going to put a wrestling show on the CW, NXT would be the one to do based on what they've done, what they do regularly. I know we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's going to be interesting to see how they configure the roster for NXT when they make the move because this year they brought in main roster people for a lot of episodes, and that goosed the ratings. And so they're gonna probably have to do some more of that when they go over to the CW. And don't be surprised if they keep some people there and try to make it into a legit third brand, much like Hunter was trying to do back in 2019. Because now, they're going to be on a network, right? And yes, it's CW, but it's still a network. And, long network TV is different than cable. Network TV shows that run for a long time, you establish cast members and you build a relationship with your audience. And, and the audience stays as you build that relationship, and the audience stays as the cast members stay a lot of times. Now, it's pro wrestling. Things change all the time, yes, but I think don't be surprised if some people who stay there a lot longer than normal because they need to establish. Obviously, some people are going to get called up and moved around, but they're going to need to establish some people to be kind of pillars of the show, and they can't just be there for 6 months, right? They're going to have to be there for a while.
Yeah, that's a good call, and I think it'll work. Look, the whole concept of rotating wrestlers, Raw and SmackDown do it all the time. You know what I mean? You could see Roman Reigns on both shows. You've seen the Usos on both shows, even to this day. It's not so people who say, oh, well, they had to send such and such main roster wrestler to NXT. It's like, well, wait a second. Raw and SmackDown do it literally all. Nick Aldis, literally, he's supposed to be a GM of one show and he's showing up on the other show.
Right. Well, they're doing storylines where him and Pierce are, basically fighting.
Yeah, they're feuding with each other. But you get the point, though. It's still you're taking a character from one show and you're putting them on the other show as well. There's no reason why you can't continue to do that with NXT. And in fact, you should, because it's a formula that works. You know what I mean? Anything can happen. You don't know what to expect. And that's why you need to tune in. It's smart. It's very smart. So NXT's number one. Number two was Raw, you said?
Yes.
Okay. So Raw is number two when it comes to featuring women's wrestling on television for who you're ranking here. And that's not a surprise. I mean, Raw was number two last year, right?
Yeah, no, they were number one previously. The first, but here's the thing with Raw. Raw, it's really just its volume because they got 3 hours, so they got more because they just got more time. I mean, I'd say Raw is not particularly efficient with how they do things.
Fair enough. Let's jump to SmackDown because there's a bigger story here with SmackDown. Like you said, with Raw, it's 3 hours. It's a lot easier. There's really no excuse for WWE not to feature more women's wrestling when you have 3 hours to fill. It doesn't make any sense not to do it. You can't give us just one women's match. And when they do it, because they do it a few times a year, it's embarrassing. But SmackDown is a disappointment, in my opinion.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Well, so SmackDown they're down from last year we're talking about decimal places here, but they only have one match every week. They barely every now and then they have two, but it's one match every week. So basically they're better than Dynamite because they do occasionally have two matches. Dynamite never has two matches, but the only thing that was good was the only thing that got better for SmackDown this year is they had more women's main events. I started keeping track of like all the match times for both Raw and SmackDown this year, men's and women's matches. And so here's what happens on SmackDown a lot. There are a lot of men's segments and matches that when you watch them, you're like, okay, they could have cut time off of this. They have a lot of men's matches on SmackDown that go 10, 11, 12 minutes that they could have got out of there in 7 or 8. I mean, it's almost every week there's at least one. There's at least one men's match every week on SmackDown that goes about 3 or 4 minutes longer than it needed to. There are promo segments that now look now. I mean, you can't call time on Roman Reigns. We know that. All right, that's just it is what it is, and they're not calling time on CM Punk right now, and they're not going to call time on Randy Orton. Okay, about a month ago when they were gearing up for the War Games, they had the whole show was centered around the two women's teams coming together, but they didn't have any extra women's matches that week. And then they have people who have been sitting who have not had a match on television in months, was it Alba Fire and Isla Dawn? Where they're tag team. They haven't had a match on television since June. Mia Yim hasn't had a match on television since like June. Like no matches, period. Like they've wrestled dark matches before the show starts. There's no excuse for anybody to go 6 months and not have a match on television. Okay, there's no excuse for that. There are a lot of weeks where they get put in the 9:15 death slot, which 2-hour wrestling show, the ones that start at 8 o'clock, that 9:15 quarter is the death slot. It's almost no matter what goes on in that quarter, it's usually the lowest rated quarter of the show. It's a quarter where you just kind of stick stuff because we needed to get it on this week, but we didn't have anywhere. We wanted to do this other stuff elsewhere. So they get stuck in the 9:15 slot a good bit, just like they do on Dynamite. SmackDown is third place because the other shows did worse, not because they did good.
So let me ask you this. When you look at NXT, Raw, and SmackDown, and you see, who's featuring women the most and who is barely getting it done, is it fair to say that NXT, and it's a younger property, they don't have the top stars on that show. These are all people who, for the most part, are being developed, or these are stars who need to be refreshed and repackaged so they come back down to help out. Is it fair to say that overall NXT is just managed better than the other two shows?
Yes, without doubt. No question.
It's interesting because it makes me wonder if you were to take the folks who run NXT as a television show, if you were to take in the creative and all that stuff and you plug them into a SmackDown, are you going to, and flip it basically, take the SmackDown folks, put them on NXT. Are you going to see everything that's happening in NXT, is that going to translate over to SmackDown and vice versa?
Maybe.
Because it almost seems like it's a management / writing team, creative team philosophy. The NXT folks want to show diversity, whereas the SmackDown folks, they just want to squeeze as much big bucks as they can.
If you watch the 3 shows this year, SmackDown gets the short end creatively. You can sense just by watching it that the amount of time and effort in the writing room and all of that they're basically their 3rd place out of the 3. Well, the Bloodline story has made like the rest of the writing lazy, basically.
Yeah, as successful as that's been. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because that has been so successful and it's been so good that, the rest of the show often, almost everything else that goes on that show is it's like playing universe mode on WWE 2K. I mean, it's like, oh, well, this week you have a match. This week they'll have a tag team match. This week they'll have another match. And then every 4th or 5th week there's a pay-per-view, right? And that's how they write a lot of SmackDown, a lot of the men's and women's stuff, other than the Bloodline. And it's, and you're seeing the results now. It's just, it's a lot of it's just lazy writing, lazy booking.
So let's move on though. So
okay.
we got WWE spots 1 through 3. They are definitely the most dedicated to featuring women's wrestling on television. Of all the shows that you've monitored. Now, obviously, I know some wise guys. What about WoW? We're not talking about WoW. That's an exclusive women's promotion.
Right.
So,
exactly.
So let's not be foolish here, folks.
Yeah.
But this is very interesting, though. So number 4 is who?
Impact Wrestling. And they took a step back this year because last year they were number 3.
So Impact Wrestling, despite the fact that you have Trinity Fatu, despite the fact that you have Jordan Grace, despite the fact that you have all these folks going on, right? Deonna Purrazzo, I know her contract is coming up soon. You would believe that Impact Wrestling is like putting on the most women's content. Hands down, that's just the way it is. They're getting it done. But then when you peel back the layers, you realize that these women have done a great job online of promoting themselves, which is part of why it seems like they are more active in the ring than they actually are, right?
Well, here's the thing. Okay. Impact lost a lot of people between the end of last year, and they lost a lot of people. All right. Going into last year, as last year closed out, they lost Mia Yim. They lost, Peyton Royce and Billy Kay. They lost Tennille Dashwood. And they lost a few other people. So they lost a good chunk of their roster last year. Then earlier on this year, Mickie James got injured. Jordan Grace's contract was up for a while, and then she came back. Then Tasha Steelz was out until the middle of this year. She just came back. So they were down a lot of people. So there wasn't so much they could do. Anyway, they basically need to add some more people. Now, I think they could have done more than they have because there were some weeks where they did not have a match or they had like a mixed tag team match or something. And I don't count a mixed tag team match as a women's match because I'm of the belief that if you let people give you Diet Coke, they'll keep giving you Diet Coke. Okay. And a mixed tag team match is it's Diet Coke. Okay. Yes, there are women in the match, but it is not a women's match.
Well, and that stuff is not drawing anyway.
If you have a mixed tag team match, I'm not giving you credit for having a women's match because it's not the same thing.
Fair enough.
Okay, because like I said, it's Coke and Diet Coke. If I want Coca-Cola and you hand me Diet Coke, I'm gonna look at you like, what is this?
So are you giving Impact a way out because they've been plagued with injury problems and because they've lost so many women who'd left the company?
Well, here's the thing: if your NFL team has injuries and you finish 7-9, yes, there's a reason you finished 7-9. You had all these injuries, but you still finished 7-9. Okay, I mean, we're not going to put you in the playoffs, right? We're not going to just put you in the playoffs, right? So, the grade is what it is, right? But for what they've had to deal with, I'd say they've done a good job for what they've had to deal with, but it still is what it is, right? I mean,
those women in that company are working far more and harder at promoting themselves than what they should have to do, considering the fact that they're in a quote unquote major company.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the company does promote them. Remember, the Impact doing everything on smaller scale because they're on Access TV. They don't have the access to some like for example, AEW is on Warner Media, and they just by being a part of Warner Media should have all types of synergy and whatnot with some of these other things, and they don't use. So Impact does not have those type of partnerships where they can just, they can't just send people to the movie premiere, right? Barbie was made by Warner Media, and yet AEW did not have any of their women wrestlers at the premiere. Whereas, WWE had Liv Morgan and Scarlett Bordeaux at the premiere.
Yeah,
and yet the company that's on the WB channel didn't have anybody there.
They couldn't get it done. But we're getting sidetracked here, though. Yes, so Impact is number 4.
Yeah,
that's the main point. There's plenty of room for improvement. Scott D. Moore, come on, bro. You can do better than that. Let's get to the real main event here. Tied for last place, we have AEW Dynamite and AEW Collision. Yeah. Literally featuring the least amount of women's wrestling for 2023. They did it in 2022. They did it in 2021.
And they did it in 2020. Because I've gone back and just for archive purposes and looked further back, and it's.
So for the history of AEW, they have proven themselves to be the least dedicated to women's wrestling. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Now here's an example. Okay. AEW is the easiest company to track numbers for. Because look, with Raw and SmackDown and NXT, I have to wait until the night of the show and to find out what the lineup is and see how many matches they're going to have. Okay? For Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and even on Impact, same thing, right? Well, Impact is taped, so you can find out ahead of time what's going to be on. But Raw, SmackDown, NXT, they do announce some matches ahead of time, but you got to wait till the night of the show to find out just how much they're going to do. AEW Dynamite, look, every Monday or at the beginning of the week, I can on my little spreadsheet, I can type in 1 match, 2 women, and I rarely ever have to change it. Maybe 2 or 3 times a year this year, I've had to go change that. But every week you can just pencil it in before you even know anything about the show. You can pencil in 1 match, 2 women, and 90% of the time you'll be right.
You said something earlier that I found interesting because I pointed out that AEW is focused on the quote-unquote key demo, as they refer to them as, white males 18 to 45 years old. That's clearly who they're trying to attract, and they haven't outright said it all in one sentence, but they give you bits and pieces, and you put it together, and that's what it is. But you said that they're slipping in that. What did you mean by that?
Well, because look at the people they have on the show.
Yeah.
They have a whole lot of people. Well, one, they still rely way too much on this inside baseball kind of stuff when it comes to what they have going on. Way too many of their big stories and their big angles rely on some basically just inside baseball kind of stuff that you would only know about if you've been following these guys all the way back to the indies, because so much of their roster is still guys who work together in PWG and work together on indie shows. And if you don't know any of that stuff, then you're completely in the dark. So that's part of it.
So when you go back and you look at the whole context of the women's division in AEW, because it's not like they have a lack of bodies. So let's call that what it is. And it's not even like they have a lack of women with star power, because some of these women have been on WWE television. They've made names for themselves. And yet AEW consistently will give you 1 women's match per television episode, and that's it. Don't ask for any more. You're not getting it.
That, and then they do things that just make no sense.
That too.
So all right. So like Toni Storm was women's champion, and she lost to Karushita, who then lost in a 4-way to Saraya, who then lost it back to Sheeta, who then lost it back to Toni Storm. Okay. And so now the point of Toni losing in the first place was to kick off this whole character change. So that's fine. But they went through about 3 or 4 different people when they could have just had her, like Saraya won the match in a 4-way. So she didn't even pin, so you could have had the 4-way, have Saraya win the title there. Like Toni walking in as champion. You could do this whole angle with Toni's character change. And then you could have had Toni beat Saraya. Instead, they put in, they had Sheeta win it twice in between. And didn't really do much with her during that time while she was champion. So they do things like that, when they never once, Jade, while she was there, they kept her in that little kind of parallel universe with the TBS championship. She never once, because she never mingled with, with Britt and Saraya and Toni and all that.
Hey,
Like
Jade said it herself. She said she did not feel she could inspire young children, especially young black and boys and girls in AEW, and she didn't feel creatively that her goals in pro wrestling matched what Tony Khan had for her. Meaning he had no plan on putting her in the world title picture anytime soon.
Well, yeah, no, I think, okay, she was never going to stay there for her whole career. She was always going to leave.
I don't think that's true. I disagree with that. I think that AEW was giving her enough of what she needed in terms of the ability to spend time with her family. Where they're based is not far from her main home. If you're going to feature on TV as often as she needs to be featured to keep her hot, if you put the world title on her and you build a division around her, why would she leave? Because the other part of it too is they offered her the money that she wanted. In fact, Tony was ready to offer her even more, and she still left. It came down to the creative and the fact that they're not dedicated to women and they're not dedicated to people of color. That was it.
And also, now it's going to be really interesting now to see what they do because Chris Statlander lost the TBS title. So
she's a disaster anyway. I'm gonna piss people off when I say that. Chris Statlander should have never, ever been the person to defeat Jade. That made no sense. And here's the best part about it. You've gotten a net nothing since that's happened. Chris Statlander has not moved a needle yet.
Well, she's not in. Well, they took the belt off of her.
Well, because she wasn't doing anything. She's not a draw.
I tend to have a higher opinion of her than you do, apparently.
So I'm sure she's a nice person, and I'm not trying to attack her personally, but I'm just saying.
I mean, just from what I've watched of her in the ring, I think she is a good wrestler, yes.
Well, she can be whatever she wants to be, but they botched her whole. She should have never been that alien gimmick. It was a silly gimmick that didn't get over. It didn't make any sense. It was something that people were laughing at her, and that was all it was. They were laughing at you, but you weren't advancing with that silly gimmick. So you come back and you're a little bit more serious. Now you're kind of like the hot girl and all that good stuff there, and that's nice. But they had no real creative for you. So again, your character never advances and turns itself into somebody who could actually make money for the company. Whereas you look at a Toni Storm, and despite the fact that the same people are so deficient at doing anything that even resembles supporting women's wrestling, Toni Storm still found a way to stand out with a character that's getting over and a concept that's getting over so much that they had to put the belt back on her. See the difference there?
Yeah, but a lot of what they're doing is just nonsensical, and that's a big problem. I think that's another reason why they're just kind of stagnating because
they don't have women with voices in the room. There might be women in the room, but they don't have a voice. Right. When they're making these decisions, it's clear that they don't have women with a voice in that room.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just it's aimless, it's directionless, it makes no sense. Honestly, Toni is really the only one on the entire show that seems to have any type of direction at all.
And I think that she's making that up as she goes along.
Very well could be. It's kind of reminiscent of when Chris Jericho was in WCW, where they just gave him 10 minutes and because they didn't care.
And he maximized his minutes. Yeah, that's fair.
And so that's where he pulled out all of his, all the things that got him over, right? And
look, Rob, here's my frustration. And for everybody listening out here, if you're new, you're still catching up. If you've been with me for a while, I'm close to 8 years now doing this show. AEW is what? They're over 4 years old. Are they officially 5 years yet? Or are we getting close to 5
Well, okay, we're talking about they're 4 years on TV.
4 years on TV. So we'll start
there.
there.
5 years as a company, 4 years on TV.
So, but 4 years on TV. So Dynamite just celebrated its 4th year on television.
Yes.
I've been saying from the very beginning, I've been calling out these exact problems, and everybody in their mama, including you, have told me that you're being too hard on them. Give them time. That criticism it's a little stiff and yada yada yada. But I saw patterns that didn't make any sense for a modern pro wrestling company. You don't need time to feature more women. Just feature more women. There's no, you don't need time to do that. You don't need time to take black and brown male singles and make them competitors for the world title. You don't need time to do that. Just do it. It's a predetermined sport.
And even like this thing with Swerve, this push to give him, he's in the.
It's not even a push.
Well, he's in the goofy championship tournament.
Yeah,
it's not
Which
even
he just lost last night, by the way.
Yeah, I heard, and that's and here we go. Like I said, we've been waiting for him to pull the rug out from under him. Here we go. Right.
And listen, I know there's a greater point that they're going to do with him because Moxley is somebody who's a fan of Swerve. If anyone's really paying attention, he said Swerve is one of his favorite wrestlers, and especially when Swerve was in Lucha Underground as Killshot, Moxley said that was my favorite wrestler by far in the world. So I think Moxley wants to feud with Swerve and ultimately put him over. But the reality of the situation is, on the most recent episode of Dynamite, Moxley defeated Swerve. Why would you defeat Swerve when he's on this ascent and everyone is getting behind him? Why would you defeat him at this point?
Because right now, you should not put him in a match with a big name person if he's not going to win.
That's it. Simple as that.
Unless it's on the big show. Like
Simple as that.
You should not put him. You should not put him in a TV match with a big name person if he's not going to win.
You just crushed his value. You crushed it.
And so it sends a message. If you do it enough times, it sends a message. It sends a message that, okay, well, this guy beats these other people, but he doesn't beat the big ones.
Nope.
And it sends a message. It just, you do it enough times.
It's ridiculous.
And to do it at this point is particular. Now, it's not, now look, he can bounce back from it. Yes, but
he's not going to be able to be as big as he could have been if they would have just put the rocket on his back and just let him go.
And you got a roster full of people he could just beat.
Yeah.
And then you save the big names for when it matters.
Man,
and then
this company has been doing the same thing in 2023 that they were doing 4 years ago. It's the same thing.
Oh, because look, it's an indie show circle jerk.
That's it.
And that's what it is. And then they get a few people in there who were not part of that world, and they might go do something different. Like Edge and Christian are doing their own thing, and like I said, it's not doing as big. It's not as big as it should be, but at least it's coherent, and and all of that, right? And when Punk was there, the stuff he was doing was at least coherent. Okay, so you get a few people from out who were not from part of that world, and when they get in there, they get a chance to do their own thing. Though they can put something together that is at least coherent. But most of the rest of that show it's the same indie show circle jerk that those guys were involved in before the company ever started.
Thank you, Booker of the Year, Tony Khan. Great job.
And it's
listen, Rob. I appreciate you joining me for International Duke Day. Why don't you let everybody know the best way that they can reach you?
All right. Well, you can find me. I'm still on Twitter. I've not left Twitter yet. That may be a resolution for 2024. I don't know, but you can still find me on Twitter at RBONNE1. You can hear me every week on the Mindless Wrestling Podcast with DJ and Jason. You can hear me on my own podcast, the Rob the Genius Podcast, every 2 weeks, basically. And you can hear me whenever I come on here.
Yeah, and hopefully in 2024, when you make your triumphant return, you come back with better sense. Because I don't, there'll be real glass on this show the next time.
How's Mr. Real Glass doing, by the way? We haven't seen him in forever.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.